It started on a Tuesday evening, the kind where the sky bruised into deep lavender and everything felt suspended, like a sigh waiting to happen. I had just come home from a long shift at the boutique downtown, my feet sore and my shoulders tense from folding clothes and smiling through customer complaints. All I wanted was a quiet dinner, a hot bath, and to lose myself in a few pages of a mystery novel before bed. But fate, I've learned, doesn't wait for invitations. It barges in, moaning softly, and you have to decide whether or not to let it inside. The house was too big for me after my divorce. 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, and a porch I rarely sat on anymore. When Matthew left, I thought I'd eventually sell it and move into something smaller, simpler. But it's funny how life builds habits around you. One day you're married, and the next you're just a woman walking through rooms filled with echoes. That's why I posted the ad online, a room for rent, private bath, decent rent, month to month. I figured if I couldn't fill the space with love, I might as well fill it with rent. He showed up 2 weeks later. His name was Tyler Matthews, and he arrived in a rusty blue pickup, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, and a weary look on his face. He wasn't what I expected, tall, lean, with a kind of rugged silence about him. His hair was sandy brown and slightly overgrown, curling just at the ends, and his voice had that quiet depth you only hear in someone who's been through something. When I asked where he was coming from, he just said, "Out west," and I didn't press. He filled out the paperwork, handed me cash for the first month, and moved into the guest room at the end of the hall. At first, we barely spoke. He kept to himself, left early in the mornings, and came back late at night. Sometimes I'd hear his boots in the hallway, or catch the faint sound of the shower running, but mostly it was like living with a shadow. Still, there was something about the way he moved, calm, controlled, like he was always bracing for something, and maybe that was what made me curious. Then came the night I heard him moan. It was nearly midnight. I had just turned off the TV and was heading to bed when I passed by his room. The door was cracked open just enough for the dim hallway light to slip in. That's when I heard it, a low, pained sound, followed by what sounded like his name whispered through clenched teeth. I paused, unsure if I should knock or walk away. The moan came again, softer this time, almost like he was fighting it. I knocked lightly. "Tyler? Are you okay?" There was silence. Then a rustle. "Yeah," he said, voice tight.
Sorry.
"Didn't mean to wake you. Are you hurt?"
No. Just bad dream.
"I'm good. Thanks." I stood there for a moment longer, listening to the quiet hum of the night, then turned and went back to my room. But sleep didn't come easy. I kept thinking about that moan, the way it sounded more real than a dream. And the next morning, when I saw him at the coffee maker, he looked exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed, and his jaw set like someone fighting ghosts. "You sure you're okay?" I asked gently. He nodded. "Didn't mean to scare you." "You didn't. If you ever need anything, I'm across the hall." That was the start of the shift. After that, he began lingering in the kitchen longer, pouring a second cup of coffee while I made toast. He asked about my work, told me he used to do construction, that he was between jobs, trying to get his head straight. I never pried, but the more we talked, the more I realized how little I knew about the man sleeping 20 feet from me, and yet, how much I wanted to. Over the next few weeks, the tension in the house changed. It wasn't uncomfortable, but charged in a way I couldn't explain. Like we were circling something unspoken. He'd help bring in groceries, offer to fix things around the house, and one evening, after a rainstorm knocked out the power, we sat by candlelight and talked for hours. I told him about Matthew, about the way it all fell apart quietly over time. He listened without judgment, his thumb absently tracing the rim of his mug. I didn't think I'd end up here, I admitted, renting a room to a stranger just to fill the silence. He looked at me then, really looked. "I don't think you're the only one." One Friday night, I came home later than usual, soaked from an unexpected downpour. I kicked off my heels, dropped my bag by the door, and was about to head upstairs when I noticed Tyler sitting on the floor by the fireplace. The room was dim, the fire flickering, and there was a bottle of bourbon on the table beside him, 2 glasses. "I figured you could use one," he said, lifting a glass toward me. I laughed. You read my mind. We sat on the floor, the fire crackling softly, and drank in silence at first. Then, slowly, the words came about childhood memories, regrets, the things we never said out loud to anyone else. He talked about his brother, about a loss that broke him in a way nothing else ever had. His voice cracked, just once, and he looked away, jaw clenched. I reached over and touched his hand, and he didn't pull away. That's when it happened again, that sound.
Low.
Almost a tremble in his chest, like a memory escaping through his throat. His fingers tightened around mine. The firelight danced over his face, and he looked so tired, so fragile beneath all that quiet strength. I'm sorry, he whispered. Sometimes it comes back when I least expect it. I squeezed his hand gently. You don't have to apologize. He looked at me then, eyes glassy but steady. You should tell me to go. Why would I do that? Because I'm a mess. I've got stuff I haven't sorted out. I wake up screaming sometimes. I barely know how to be in a room with someone else without holding my breath. I moved closer, our knees touching. Then don't hold your breath here. The silence stretched between us, thick and warm. And then, slowly, he leaned in, not rushed, not desperate, but careful, like he was giving me time to pull away. I didn't. Our lips met, soft at first, then fuller, deeper. It wasn't perfect or polished. It was two lonely people finding a little solace in each other's arms. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine and exhaled. That night I let him in, not just into my room, but into something I thought I'd shut off forever. There was no grand confession, no promises of forever. Just warmth, presence, and something fragile yet real growing between us. The next morning, we made pancakes. He flipped them badly, and I laughed harder than I had in months. He smiled like he hadn't in years. It didn't become a fairy tale overnight. There were hard days, nights he paced the floor, moments he disappeared into himself. But he stayed, and I stayed. We began rebuilding something, not just as landlord and tenant, but as two people who met in the space between what was broken and what could still be mended. I don't know what the future holds. I don't even know how long he'll stay. But I do know this. Sometimes the people we barely know come into our lives for a reason. Sometimes they moan in the dark, haunted by things we may never understand. And sometimes, the most human thing we can do is let them in, not just through the door, but into our lives. Because healing doesn't always look like perfection. Sometimes it sounds like a quiet moan in the night, and a voice whispering back, I'm here. You're not alone. And that night I let him in. And I'm not sorry I did.